It's just been one offseason for Jonathan Smith, but he's already taught us so much. Plus, hey, Bryson Williams, he commits to the Michigan State Eaglets. That'll make sense if you know what I'm talking about. Let's go.
You are Locked On Spartans, your daily podcast on the Michigan State Spartans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of Locked On Spartans is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms, got that right, they apply. Spartan friends, Spartan family, Locked On Spartans listeners, thank you all so much for kicking off your day with us here at Locked On Spartans of the Locked On Podcast Network. Shout out to you everyday listeners out there. Cannot thank you all enough. If you ever want to reach out, lockedonspartans@gmail.com is the best place to find us. Please rate, review, subscribe, comment below if you're listening on YouTube of what your best lesson that you've learned from Jonathan Smith has been so far this offseason. That's going to set the table for us here in this conversation because, look at, we're going to go into the mailbag here. Jay Krupp, sorry, I don't really know the correct way to pronounce that, but nevertheless, got to meet him a few years ago in Chicago. He delivers with a great mailbag question, so Jay Krupp, hope you're doing well out there. He writes in, besides a cultural shift, what else sticks out the most about Jonathan Smith's first few months? The cultural shift, obviously, that beams the brightest amongst the rest of them, right? Like, it has been a whiplash of how things are done here in East Lansing. Gone are the days of the Ferraris, the goats on the field, the fighter jets on the field, if my memory serves correct. And now it's just kind of like boring June official visits, which is almost refreshing in a way. Again, we'll get into a lot of this later because many of these lessons so far that we've learned have been about recruiting. So let's just start right there. What he has taught us about recruiting and also kind of about the portal too, because look, just 27 official visits in the month of June. Back in the Mel Tucker days, his last full class in the month of June, I believe it was 38, maybe 37 visitors. Anyway, it was high 30s visitors. A lot of official visits going on in the month of June, if you all remember that. Just 27 for Jonathan Smith. Now, this is why that number is important. Each school gets 70 official visits they can use in a year. That also counts towards transfer portal targets. So when you limit it to just 27 visits in June, yes, you're also banking other official visit opportunities. Say you're trying to flip kids later on in the season, in the fall. But as you go into the offseason, as you start looking in the transfer portal, which this could be another big upcoming offseason in the transfer portal, not to put the cart way ahead of the horse and start talking about the upcoming offseason before you've even kicked off 2024. But yeah, that could also foreshadow what is going to be happening, that, hey, holes are going to have to be filled still within the transfer portal. Of course, recruiting is always going to be important here, but with the roster that Jonathan Smith took over, I think him showing just 27 official visits, many of those guys that have already committed or eventually committed, I think that shows that, yes, he's going to be using a lot of those for the transfer portal. So what else have we learned? It's how concise he is, how deliberate he is at recruiting, okay? I'll bark the number out one more time, 27 official visits in the month of June. Of those 27 official visits, 15 of them were either commits or eventually committed to Michigan State. We're going to talk about one of those kids in the second segment here. Bryson Williams just committed before the weekend. How awesome is that? But that is over 50%. That is amazing. I mean, Mel Tucker's recruiting staff, his last full cycle, the June of 2022, how many of those eventually became commits in 2023? Or maybe it was... Anyway, his last full class, all right, of the 38 official visits they had in June, only 7 of them were commits or eventually committed. Hey, that's 7 of 38. Now we're going 15 of 27. So this teaches us, and we talked about this during the whole like Caden Strayhorn saga, like, oh, were they scared to recruit him? Or did they just figure that, you know what, they only go after kids they have a good shot of getting? It's the latter. All right, and he's also shown that at Oregon State. He keeps it small, and the batting average that he has on kids that visit in June that are either commits or eventually commit is very high relative to the rest of the nation. So he's only going to get in battles where they have a legitimate shot of winning it. That's another whiplash from the last staff too. You know, not just to, keep throwing dirt on the grave of the last staff and everything, but that is something they missed the mark on considerably, is understanding where they were with a lot of these official visits. There was many times where they thought that they were either the top school or the second school, and they were just that close behind whoever the leading school was. And then it turns out, a few weeks later, or when the kid eventually did commit, like, you barely had a hat on the table. Like, they just came for the photo shoot or maybe anything else. But yeah, just knowing where they're at, and that speaks to how structured this staff is. This goes beyond Jonathan Smith, right? This goes to his personnel group that he brought over from Oregon State. They run a very structured board, and that goes far beyond just recruiting. Like, yes, they do a really good job of identifying who they have a legitimate shot of getting when they do have these official visits, but also in the transfer portal. I don't think this is true, but like I just envision Jonathan Smith and company, the whole staff, all the personnel, like they're just sitting in front of a massive whiteboard with names stacked in a pecking order, one after another, because, well, you go back to the Jaden Mangum departure. All right, he leaves. Great. Within 12 minutes, they were on the phone with Nikai Martinez of University of Central Florida, and they just plugged him in just like that. They didn't waste any time. It wasn't a thing where Mangum left and, oh my God, we got to panic. We don't really know what our next step is going to be. They had it lined up immediately. Or Brandon Lane. He was going to be the defensive tackle that transferred over from Stephen F. Austin. It was going to be a great little plug-in for Derek Harmon once he left. Things did not work out there. All right, again, just like that, Jalen Satchel, he's the next guy in line. It's almost as if they had a giant pecking order. It is so structured. There's no panic. They're not just throwing out offers for no rhyme or reason. That is deliberate with Jonathan Smith. So also, too, we just want to throw this out, how the portal was operated with the money. And I'm curious to know if this is going to be something that happens in the future. Well, first and foremost, we do know what will happen in the future, is that double dipping will not be tolerated here. Like, we saw a lot of players enter the portal early on, and then they came back. Good amount of them got some raises, to come back to Michigan State from what we know. Guys like Geno Vandermark, for example. Guys like Derek Harmon, for example. Widely speculated he was the top, maybe just one of the top paid defensive tackles in the Big Ten. Great. You got the money you're looking for. Everyone's happy. And then you look at that. 2 months later, they go right back into the portal. They're asking for more raises. And from what I understand, from what a lot of people that I know who know things understand, Jonathan Smith didn't even entertain the thought of giving them additional raises on top of that. So that sets the tone right there, right? And that also goes to the culture that we've all talked about, is that, yes, sure, fine, go to the transfer portal, see what your market value is initially, come back. Whomst could possibly complain about that? That's just how the world works, right? When you do it like a month or two later, that's not going to be tolerated. Pulling fast ones on Michigan State is not going to be tolerated. But what will be interesting to see is how they're going to spend their money here. Because, okay, are we going to spend a lot just on one really strong player? Or are we going to disperse that money against young, promising players, kind of like what we just saw this offseason? All right, Derek Harmon is asking for X. Geno Vandermark is asking for X. Do we want to pay them all that money to, let them double dip, set a bad precedent here in the program? But let's say they didn't even double dip. Let's say they asked for that initial value right off the bat. Is it smart to pay that money to those players, which are good players? I just don't know if they're like program changing players, or is that player's salary better spent against 2 players, 3 players, like a Jeremiah Hughes out of LSU, a Samaj Bridgman, the transfer from Michigan, getting young project players. I think for this cycle, it makes a lot of sense to go for, we're going to go for quantity and hopefully grow them into quality players rather than just one quality player, because this roster needs a lot of fixing in a lot of different areas. So that is one lesson. I do wonder if it's going to be like that in the future, or hey, you know what? We might do an episode on this here in the near future, but you see it from Ole Miss, just for an example. They notice that they have a pretty down year as far as the scheduling goes. Like, they got a pretty gettable schedule. So with NIL, you know what? They did go all in. They did pay a lot for top-end players. Will Michigan State ever find a situation like that in maybe 2025 or 26 or 27? I don't know. But for right now in the rebuilding phase, that was the way they decided to disperse the money. It's like, let's be smart with it. Let's not go out and buy like the flashy Maserati. Let's just get a few sensible, base model Equinoxes here, and then hopefully one day we will build ourselves up to making those good players one day. So I think those are the lessons that we have learned so far as far as recruiting and the portal goes. And also, just to throw something out as far as roster makeup and personnel, We all have also learned how he likes his running backs. He likes them beefy, like 6 feet, 6'1", 200 plus pounds. A lot of powerful running backs. You see it with Brandon Tulis, K'Ron Lynch-Adams, the transfer out of UMass. And, well, you're keeping Nate Carter around too. I mean, why wouldn't you want to keep Nate Carter around? But nevertheless, it's not like he needs a Thunder guy and then a Lightning guy. He likes it Thunder, 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 Thunder. And you could also go back to Oregon State and check that out with Damian Martinez, a guy that's 6 foot, 230 pounds, made a lot of hay for the Beavers over there. All right, folks, we will be back. I got one more nugget, and then we're going to get into the Bryson Williams commitment. But first, guys, we have a word from a good friend of ours. eBay Motors has got you covered wherever you need it, guys, with your ride or die. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. We're talking superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Gang, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you are looking for. And best of all, with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time, or it's your hard-earned money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home the huge win. So what are you waiting for out there? Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, one other nugget here that I just want to point out from what we have learned here from just Jonathan Smith and how he operates around here. Just one offseason, or one full offseason here at Michigan State. It's just how straightforward he is in press conferences, right? Like, I know that has nothing to do with what goes on in the field, or it hardly means anything, right? But that is also a little different than what we've learned from the last regime, where everything was just so buttoned up, maybe even a little too buttoned up and mysterious at times. But look, if a guy's hurt, you're going to hear about it, right? Like, there were some injuries that happened in the spring showcase. He was pretty upfront about it. Or, hey, how about last year's quarterback battle between Noah Kim, Kaiten Hauser? It was very mysterious, and for good reason. We're not going to knock Mel Tucker just for that right here. But there were other position battles last year where it was very clear-cut who was going to be the number one guy, and it was still built up as like it's a wide-open battle. We're going to see how everything unfolds. Like, whereas Jonathan Smith this offseason, he was asked about the quarterback battle. I use serious air quotes around that when they got Tommy Schuster, and Jonathan Smith just shot everyone straight. It's like, no, it's Aiden Child's job right here. We're not even going to give the facade that this could possibly even potentially be a battle this offseason. So just straightforwardness, which is like, again, it depends on your speed. I think it's a little refreshing. I didn't hate Mel Tucker for, keeping it mysterious ahead of opening day, but it was as the season went on, and we just saw guys like blow up in the middle of the year, and then we're saying, oh no, he's just a little sore. Like, Mel, I think they're currently sawing his leg off in the emergency room right now. Like, we can be honest about some things in life, but anyway, I think that's been a big difference so far here with Jonathan Smith. Speaking of press conferences, one bit of news here. Dylan Tatum, Jack Valiant, and Nate Carter, those are the three players that will be representing Michigan State alongside Jonathan Smith at Big Ten Media Days. Not this week, but the following week. I believe on Wednesday is when Michigan State will be talking, on July 24th. So there you have it. My quick thoughts on that. I love it. Sure, maybe it's like a little strange. Oh, why isn't Aiden Childs on there? He's going to be the face of the program. He's the quarterback. I also think he's been in front of microphones for combined 50 hours this offseason. He spent a half hour of those hours on this show this offseason. So he's been asked every question in the world. Maybe fans want to hear a little bit more from him. Maybe you want to see the quarterback, the face of the program representing Michigan State. But again, maybe they're just giving him a break, or hey, maybe focusing on more upperclassmen players. That could also be the emphasis too. We know Dylan Tatum, great guy to have in front of a camera, great guy to have in front of a microphone. Same with Nate Carter. Interested to learn more about Jack Valiant, the transfer tight end from Oregon State. He's talked to media, just not nearly as much as the other two guys have in their time at Michigan State. Obviously, they've been here a little longer. But yes, that is the rundown right there for Big Ten Media Days. Folks, the Michigan State Eaglets have gotten another player. And I say Michigan State Eaglets because For the third time this offseason, they've gotten a commit from Orchard Lake St. Mary's. This one comes from Bryson Williams, 6'2", 200-pound athlete, again from Orchard Lake St. Mary's. They play on the red turf over there. They go by the Eaglets, so that is why I'm calling us the Michigan State Eaglets. If you have a free Friday night and you're in the Metro Detroit area this fall, go ahead and just root on 3 future Spartans. He made the commitment official at the end of last week, and from what we understand from all the reporting over at Spartans Illustrated, 24/7 Sports, wherever you get your rivalry fodder, this was brought down like the last minute. His mom even mentioned that yes, I almost went over and asked if he needed some help because she could hear the angst through the walls. That's from a 24/7 Sports story, but yeah, a stressful decision for this kid to the last minute. He took official visits to Pitt, Kansas, and you know what? The finalist who Michigan State beat out, Harvard, according to all the rumors that we are hearing out there. So this kid, brainiac, he also took an official visit to Rice, I believe. He had an offer that he was considering heavily from Howard. So he really focused on academics. Of course, Michigan State, no slouch in the academic game, as we all know. But man, when you have like the Harvards of the world, the Rices of the world, and he's seriously considering it? Yeah, I mean, you know where the kids' priorities are. Well, they're also on the football field, too, because committing to Michigan State. Now, this is interesting because, like we said, he's an athlete, okay? He does not really pigeonhole to one position, and you get that a lot sometimes in recruiting. It's like, okay, yeah, he's classified as an athlete, but really we all know he's going to be a receiver or a linebacker. But no, this was, in every sense of the definition, this is a get his commitment, figure out where he's going to play later on. Now, at Michigan State, it looks like he's going to be on the offensive side of the ball. Receiver, running back, wherever you can throw him on the field, that's where Michigan State is going to have him. Pitt and Kansas, from what I believe, they were going to recruit him for more of that box safety role. He also plays that for Orchard Lake St. Mary's, too. But, again, guys, this is somewhere or someone where you just figure out somewhere to put him on the field. Now, just a little bit about his game. He, just to put it bluntly, he looks like a grown man out there on his highlight tape. Like, he looks like he's in his third year of college, playing against a bunch of kids that are still figuring out high school. So, yes, it is clear who is the Division I Power 4 prospect when you watch Orchard Lake St. Mary's film. He just towers over everyone, just physically already there. And I got to say, it reminds me of the Ladarius Jefferson commitment. If you remember that a few years ago out of Muskegon, Ladarius Jefferson, great player. Quarterback, commits to Michigan State. It's like, we're just going to figure out where he belongs on the field when he gets here. Tried it out at running back. Didn't necessarily work out here. Eventually transferred to Western Michigan. But why you can believe a little bit more in the Bryson Williams commitment is, well, he already plays these positions, right? Like, he already plays receiver. He's comfortable running the ball. He also does some punt and kickoff return for Orchard Lake St. Mary's. I believe he also helps with parking and traffic after the games, too. He truly does it all every Friday night for St. Mary's. But, yeah, this is truly just one of the, okay, we're going to see where he goes because he also plays safety too, and he is physical as a receiver. That's what I like about him too. It is a mismatch against pretty much any corner that you see any Friday night when you see Bryson Williams play for Orchard Lake St. Mary's. Now, as a runner and as a returner, well, first and foremost, the 4.45 40 time, yeah, that bodes well. But what has really impressed me is his vision. There is no mystery as to why he has a lot of punt return and kickoff return touchdowns in his highlight film. He is thinking first level, second level, if not third level, the entire time he's running the ball. And he has many touchdowns where, look, once he breaks by that first tackler, it's a two-hand touchdown. Like, no one's even coming close to him. He's got the really good vision to go along with that speed. So let's look at the recent crop of skill position players here. Wide receivers. So far in this 2025 class, you have the speedster Charles Taplin out of Texas. You have Braylon Collier out of Sandusky, Ohio. He's also fast, but again, I don't say this lightly. I don't want to put too much pressure on the kid or, build his stock up so high where, building him up to be let down. But Braylon Collier, I do see a lot of Jaden Reed in his game, like undersized traditionally for a wideout perhaps. You might be thinking, okay, hey, he's 6 foot. That's great. Good for a slot receiver. He's really fast. But then you go see him make some jump ball, high point catches where you think, oh my goodness gracious, this guy is actually like a bona fide wideout right here. So I'm very high on Braylon Collier. You pair Bryson Williams up with that trio. Awesome. 2024, the year before, you got Nick Marsh. You have Jalen Brown. Two guys that are 6'3", more your bigger body receivers, perhaps your X and the Z. And then Austin Clay, too, late addition to that class. I believe he'll profile more of a slot receiver too. Running back, 2025, you already have Jace Clarizio, right in Michigan State's backyard out of East Lansing High School the year prior. Brandon Tulis, Mekhi Frazier, two of those bigger body running backs, kind of like what we talked about in that first segment. That's how Jonathan Smith likes it. So, is MSU done recruiting skill position players for the 2025 class? I believe so, because they've only had 3 receivers visit so far in the month of June. We're counting Bryson Williams in that group. All of them were committed or eventually did commit. They only had 2 running backs visit in the month of June. One of them, Jace Clarizio. The other, John Denman. He eventually committed to TCU. So it's not like there's any other receivers or running backs that visited in June that were waiting for the commitment of or to see where they're going to go. So I believe that this is it for your skill position players for the 2025 class. Now, speaking more to the June visits broadly, as a whole, like the 27 visitors that visited, who is still left out there to commit? Of the 27 kids, guys, there's only 3 that have not announced their commitment. Now, let's go through the list right here. Chris McCorkle, cornerback. He was committed to Indiana, visited Michigan State, and during his visit to Michigan State, that's when he announced his decommitment from Indiana. But as much as that makes sense for that timeline to line up, from everything we know, Michigan State is going to go in a different direction, so do not be holding your breath for the commitment of Chris McCorkle, at least to Michigan State as things stand right now. LaRue Zamorano, 4-star corner out of the West Coast. He was one of the early visitors. I believe he visited that first weekend here in East Lansing. Things might be blowing more towards the Washington side of things, but you know what? After the official visit season, after June, he didn't commit anywhere, so maybe Michigan State does have a second chance of landing that commitment. And then the last guy, Mekhi Newton, he's actually going to be committing pretty soon here this week, committing on July 18th. He's also visited University of Central Florida and NC State. So that is a defensive tackle that we are looking for the commitment of right now. But that's it. Of the 27 kids, there are only 3 in the month of June that have not pledged their commitment anywhere. So just to bring you up to speed on all of that. So what is next for Michigan State in the world of recruiting? They have 15 commits, hovering around the top 50 class right now. Again, I mean, we've talked about this ad nauseum. Is it the flashiest number? Absolutely not. Can it be like this every year moving forward? Personally, I wouldn't like it to be, but this is where it is with the first full offseason under Jonathan Smith. Recruiting is predicated a lot on 2-year relationships. A lot of these are very quick relationships that he is making, like a lot with the Orchard Lake St. Mary's kids, right? With DJ White, Jane Savory, and now Bryson Williams. That was one of the first, if not the first school in Michigan that they visited, putting emphasis on that. So you're hoping that it blossoms more in the 2026 class. This 2025 class, I'm not going to call it like patchwork, but there are a lot of legitimate circumstances around why it's around like the top 50 class. But nevertheless, you have 15 commits right now. So let's just go position group by position group and see, hey, where does Michigan State need more commits right now? Quarterback, well, I think it's pretty good. You got your one quarterback. They got 2 in the last class. So Leo Hannon for 2025. I don't think they're going to be going towards another quarterback unless Leo Hannon decommits or something like that. Wide receiver, running back, we just talked about. It's good. You have Jace Clarizio. You have Bryson Williams if you want to use him as a running back. Just got 2 in the last class. Wide receiver, you can count as 3 receivers in this class. Tight end, you have 2. I think you're good there. So for quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, you're probably in a good spot right there. Now, offensive line. We had Rhino Blinus on not too long ago, the recruiting expert over at Spartans Illustrated. You got Drew Nichols on the inside. You also lost out on the commitment of Darius Aflava and Houston Torres. But Rhino Blinus said that they might only just be taking 1 more interior offensive lineman. So that could be another point of emphasis right there, interior offensive line. For your tackles, right now you have Justin Bell, the behemoth out of Macomb, Dakota, 6'8", 300 pounds. That's solid. Maybe you take another tackle. You can never have enough tackles in recruiting classes, especially early on with how good of a developer offensive line coach Jim Maholchek is. Now, defensive lineman, I think this is where you start to get into your needs here, whether it's interior defensive lineman, again, Mekhi Newton, he could be committing later this week, or that rush edge position. Now, they've gotten some pretty solid guys, young guys in the transfer portal, right? Like Samaj Bridgman, he could be a rush edge. Anthony Jones from Indiana, he could be a rush edge. There are candidates, or Tyler Gilson, too, another one from Cincinnati. Young guys that can profile as rush edges. They only brought 1 in the month of June that could profile as that. Sherrod Henderson, he ends up committing to Virginia Tech. So, yes, you do need someone there. I do wonder, though, how heavy they're going to go because Sherrod Henderson was really the only rush edge that they had on campus in the month of June. So maybe they are happy with those young transfers that they did get moving forward here. Linebacker, you're good. You got Damari Malone. You got DJ White. Yes, I mean, would you want Grant Bierman? Of course you did, but he's committed to Purdue. I think with two linebackers, that might be where they're going to be settled at right now for this time being. Now, secondary, yes, you could always use more there. So there you have it. I know they have Aiden West, George Mullins. Maybe you get someone that profiles more as a safety out of this bunch. But yes, with 15 commits right now, they still have a handful of spots left. So I think it's going to be more on the defensive side of the ball and the offensive line. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Let's keep the ball rolling on recruiting right now, but really quick, just to end this show, let's go through some basketball recruiting news because we have not talked about this in a while, and there has been some news and notes that have popped up in the last few days that we're just going to get to right now. So really quick, guys, Jordan Scott, 6'6" wing out of the DMV area. He is down to his final three, Virginia Tech, Maryland, and MSU. He's going to be officially visiting those three schools. MSU gets the last visit from Jordan Scott on October 4th. Now, he has remarked that he has not been to Virginia Tech and Maryland as much as he's been to MSU, despite those other two schools being closest in proximity to him. And he told 24/7 Sports, quote, "They made it based on my relationship with Coach Izzo, Wojcik, and Borovich." When he says they made it, he means the top three. I've had a long relationship with them, and they've recruited me for a long time. They play great basketball, have a great culture, and just from watching them, it seems like a place I could play at. So, okay, there we go. Okay, Jordan Scott. Tom Izzo has spent a lot of times. Actually, Carter Elliott over at Sleepers Media, he had a great quote. He's saying that Tom Izzo spent more time in the living room of Jordan Scott's household than he has in his own house in East Lansing. So I love that from our guy Carter Elliott over there at Sleepers Media. So keep your eye on the Jordan Scott commitment. Another few big names to watch out for, guys. Niko Bundalo, 6'11" power forward, top 25 player in the nation, trying out right now for the Serbian U18 national team over there. Will be visiting Michigan State September 6th. Niko Bundalo, I swear, is a name that we've been talking about since 2019. Michigan State's name has been attached to this kid for quite some time, but unfortunately, there is another school that is attached to him now. Before he visits Michigan State, he's visiting UConn, that little school over there on the East Coast. And he actually also just booked an official visit for Ohio State later on in that month. But yes, it'll be UConn the last weekend of August. The week after, it'll be Michigan State on September 6th. And then Ohio State later on that month. But yes, that is definitely the crown jewel of the class that we are looking at. Trent Sisley, 6'7" forward, top 75 player. He's got a list of official visits right now. Purdue, Indiana, Notre Dame, all in his home state. He's going to visit just one school out of the state of Indiana. You could already guess where I'm going with this. It's Michigan State visiting on October 12th. Braylon Mullins, 6'6" guard out of Indiana, really sound shooter. Set an official visit to Michigan State that opening weekend of the football season, the FAU weekend. Also visits to Michigan, North Carolina, Indiana, and Tennessee right after. Now, we've been doing a lot of Orchard Lake St. Mary talk so far. There's a massive basketball recruit out of there, Trey McKinney, 6'4" guard, Team USA under 18 national team player. I believe he starts on that team, if I'm not mistaken. Really, really solid player. No official visit to Michigan State slated yet. He does have an official visit slated to Michigan, though, right now. So that is another crown jewel of this class that Michigan State is going after. But as it goes for Orchard Lake St. Mary's kids, no official visit set for Trey McKinney yet. So, yeah, just to put a bow on basketball recruiting right there. One last nugget to leave everyone on. Since we're talking about basketball anyway, we didn't talk about this yet. It's not groundbreaking news, but Michigan State will be facing Niagara November 7th, I believe, to open up their season. I don't think that they'll have a game beforehand, perhaps an exhibition or a scrimmage. But what do we know about Niagara? Not much. They have never faced Michigan State. They are only 4-16 against Big Ten programs, but this is a real fun piece of knowledge here. Greg Paulus is the head coach of Niagara. If you remember him, the Duke standout, also the former Syracuse quarterback. Yeah, Greg Paulus, he's on the sidelines of Niagara, the Purple Eagles. So if you already knew that nickname, congratulations. You are a brainiac when it comes to college sports teams and logos. All right, guys, we will be back later on this week. If you want more basketball talk, we're going to have Carter Elliott on here in a little bit, perhaps to start next week. But folks, if you want to reach out, again, lockedonspartans@gmail.com. Come find me at Sheehan_sports on Twitter. And folks, above all, make sure you have a fantastic weekend. Love you all. Go Green.